What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you've seen a few videos back, we brought this little $500 Civic to the dyno to see what it would make with the automatic transmission and the JDM D15B that's in it. And in that video, I mentioned that we were going to be converting it over to a 5-speed swap and adding a turbo to it. So today, I'm going to run you guys through the project, and we're going to start doing the 5-speed swap. Not going to do the turbo in today's video, but we're going to get it swapped over to a 5-speed. So let's go ahead, get through the intro, and jump right into today's video. Now that we've gotten through the intro, I want to give you guys a quick look at some of the parts we're going to be using in today's video. In the last video we did with the Civic, I showed you guys the 5-speed transmission, the pedal assembly, and the shift linkage. But right here behind me on this bench are some of the new parts we decided to pick up for this project. So as you can see, we've got a brand new clutch master and slave cylinder, and then we decided to go with a stage 1 clutch kit from EXEDY. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. There's the part number for that. All these parts will be linked in the description below. And then we also decided to pick up a new EXEDY flywheel for this thing. The clutch is a stage 1 organic, and then the flywheel is just a factory replacement. Came with a throwout bearing and alignment tool and a couple other little nifty things. So let's go ahead and get the car started up. We're going to back it in the garage and start tearing this thing apart. So we got this thing backed in here. As you guys can see, there is tons of room around this thing. I'm used to having the Hellcat or the GTO in here, which takes up the entire garage. You got tons of room to work in here, which is cool. But I think the first thing that we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and get this thing jacked up, put up on stands, and we're going to start pulling the axles out of it, just because that's the thing I'm looking forward to the least. So we'll get the axles pulled out of this thing, and then we can start working in the engine bay. I'm not sure if I'm going to pop the hood right off it to get it out of the way, but we'll decide when we get there. So like I said, throw it up on stands, start pulling the axles out, and then we'll go from there. Gonna go ahead and break the axle nuts loose. Gonna try dropping the lower ball joints. There it goes. Sorry for the background noise, guys. I fired up the heater. It got cold in here. But now we can go ahead, a 17 mil wrench, 17 mil socket, and disconnect the strut. Now just take a 3/8 ratchet, no socket, and we want to pop this drain plug loose. Alright, we'll let this finish draining and we'll start pulling the axles out. Use a pry bar to pop the axle, and we should be able to just grab it. Get this one out. Now we can go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. All right, both axles are out. Alright, so the next thing I'd like to do is start getting the exhaust dropped. I'm going to try to drop it at this round donut flange at the catalytic converter right here. We're going to have to make an exhaust for this thing when it's time to put the turbo on anyways. But for now, I'm going to try to drop it here. Worst case scenario, we can cut it. So let's go ahead and try to get this thing dropped. I got a socket on there. With rusty bolts, I like to hit them a few times. Sometimes it helps the rust or the threads break free. So let's go ahead and see if we can't pop these loose. Alright, now we can start draining the coolant out of this thing. We've got the radiator drained, so now I'm going to go ahead and start disconnecting all the hoses for it. I think we're going to go ahead and pull this radiator right out of our way, just so we don't hit it when we're doing the swap here. So I'm going to undo the hoses. So this is the point that we are at. We've got the exhaust disconnected, radiator out, the CV axles out. Now I'm ready to just start undoing all of our electrical connections. We've got to do the throttle cable and the fuel line. I'm going to disconnect the fuel line right here at the rail, and same with the throttle cable. And then we've got to undo all of our grounds and things like that. I think I'm going to take the power steering pump and just unbolt it and zip tie it out of our way if we can get away with that, but we'll have to wait and see. And I will bring you guys back when we're a little closer to getting this thing pulled out. So here's the plan right now. I went ahead and took this bolt out of this front AC bracket, and we're going to thread it into the top of this alternator bracket, or whatever this bracket was originally for. Looks solid. So that happens to be the same thread. We're going to thread that into there. We're going to put our chain into that. And then I'm going to take the other end of our chain, and we will undo this motor mount or stabilizer bar, whatever it is. And we will use one of the bolts out of here through the other end of the chain, so that our balancing bar for our engine hoist will go this way. And we should be able to get this thing situated somewhat straight to come out. So that's what I'm going to work on now. I'm going to try to get this mount or stabilizer bar over here disconnected. I think I should be able to drop this just fine. We've got 3 other mounts holding this thing. So I'm going to try to get that out of the way. And then we will get our hoist hooked up and drop the motor mounts and then start trying to pull this thing out.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
That one was on there. Alright, so now we should be able to go back over to that side. I'm going to loosen, yeah, that's hot. I'm going to loosen that one a little bit more, and we're going to put tension on this and see if the engine starts to come up. Back off on this one just a little more. Alright guys, so it's the next day. As you can see, we got this thing up in the air, and we're starting to undo all the bell housing bolts, getting everything disconnected, and then we're going to go right around and undo the flex plate bolts. You can see we got one undone here. We're going to just turn the engine over, spin it around, and pop all those out. Then we'll set this thing on the ground and start splitting the transmission off it and figure out if we're missing anything, what we might need, and start putting this thing back together.
There you go, alright. Now just slide back and pull, or just lift up and I'll pull this board out of the way. A little bit. I did it, just so it didn't go dropping hard. There you go, you're out. That's good. That's it. You're good. Anchor out.
Torque converter and all.
Yep. Let me good now. There it goes.
Alright guys, so as you can see, we've got this thing all torn apart. We've got our old automatic transmission over here, which worked perfectly fine. So I went ahead and threw it up on Facebook Marketplace. Maybe someone else can use it. 250 bucks with the torque converter and everything. Then we've got our box of parts that came with our 5-speed. It's got a brake, clutch, and gas pedal in there, as well as some other miscellaneous parts. And then we've got our 5-speed transmission over here. This one was used, obviously. It's a little dirty. I cleaned it up, but I think it's going to work just fine. So we've got our engine hung up in the air. And I think the next thing that we're going to work on is getting the flex plate bolts off so that we can start putting our nice new flywheel clutch and pressure plate together. Then we will go ahead and prep the transmission to go in. We've got a new slave for it, as well as a throwout bearing and a couple other things. So we can get all of this stuff prepped, put it back together, and get ready to set it back into the car. We did go ahead and make a list so that if there's any parts that we're missing, we can put a list together and figure out what we need to track down. So let's go ahead, get this thing dressed, get some nice new parts on it, and set it back in the car. So we've got 6 12.17 millimeter bolts here holding the flex plate on. So we're gonna zap those off quick. Got our flex plate off. Now I'm just going to wipe that up a little bit and we can start setting our new flywheel on. Alright, so we've got our new flywheel with the bolts that came with our manual transmission here. The guy threw them in for us. So we're just going to go ahead and throw this together real quick. Alright guys, now we need to torque this thing down to 87 foot-pounds. Alright, we've got our flywheel torqued down to 87 foot-pounds. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to brake clean all this to get any oils off. And then we can start putting our new pressure plate and clutch together. So we got everything Loctited and we're just working our way around in a crisscross pattern to try to suck this thing in nice and even. We got our alignment tool in and bottomed out up against the pilot bearing. You want to make sure that your alignment tool slides freely in and out of the clutch disc into your pilot bearing. And now we're ready to start test fitting our transmission.
Hold that. You gonna be able to hold it?
If we're quick about it.
Decide what side I'm gonna get on. Okay, right about there. You gotta go down.
Good?
Yep.
Alright, now take a breath for a second.
That arm brings you out that way. Yep, how's your side?
Good in the back, yeah.
Getting some hoses. Yep. She's going. Your side again. No.
Oh, the alternator sitting in the back.
Oh, come to me.
There we
On
go.
the side a little
Yeah,
bit.
we're good.
No, we're good. Keep her coming. I'll pull forward a little
Yeah, we're
bit.
just trying to do
The
it.
hoses. Yep.
There it goes.
Let's see if that's the hose. I'll lift it up probably.
Yes.
Good now. Pull the hoses up. Yep.
Alright, hold on. I gotta go around my power steering pump. Are we hitting something or no?
Nope.
No, no, we're still
Rubbing on hoses.
we got those. We're fine actually.
Yeah, we're fine.
That hoses up good. Yeah. Alright, watch your fingers.
Where's the rear mount bolts right there?
Way back there.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we're getting
gotcha.
Yeah, but we gotta go back a little.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, like right there would be lined up with mine.
We don't know what's gonna exactly
If these
fit.
mounts are even right. These are still the automatics. So as you can see, we got this thing set back down in here. We're just plugging everything in, hooking everything up. We are missing a starter because the automatic one doesn't fit, so we might have to wait on that. But if we get everything else done, I can just run down to AutoZone and grab one for now. I'm gonna go ahead and start throwing the axles back in this thing while he keeps plugging stuff in and hooking the alternator up. So let's get the axles thrown in this thing so that we can roll it out. Alright guys, so it's a few days after the last clip that you had seen, and the reason for that is we got a little snowstorm here, and I didn't want to leave the GTO out in the snow. It had never seen snow, so I didn't want to start now. So we just slapped this thing back together just enough to get it to roll out so that we could get the GTO in, and now it's after the storm, so we've got this thing back in here. All you really missed was us setting the engine in, which is super self-explanatory. Same way it came out. You've got the 3 main mounts, one in the back and one on each side, and then you've also got 2 mounts up front. That one mine never had, so we're not going to worry about that one. And then this one down here is different, so I want to go over a few things that you are going to need to do this swap. I already showed you the parts that we had bought, but there were a few things that I didn't mention and or that we are missing. So one of those things being this transmission mount right here, the lower front transmission mount. The automatic goes to this bushing down here and then just bolts to 2 bolts on the auto, but they're way up here on that one. So the manual one is different. There's 3 bolt holes, 1, 2, and then there's a 3rd one down lower. And you can't make the automatic one work unless we use some spacers and stuff. So I think what we're gonna do there is I'm gonna go ahead and make a solid mount because I don't really care about vibration and harshness and stuff. So we're gonna make those solid, so when the turbo's in here, this thing should be perfectly fine. Another thing that I wanted to mention is inside the car, when we did the shift linkage, I didn't really cover much of it, but the pedals were the biggest pain in the butt of this whole project so far. And the reason for that is they just don't want to come out of there. So what we ended up doing, like I mentioned, is I just switched over the brake pedal from our manual assembly, left everything else in place, and then just added the clutch. And if you do it that way, it's not as hard as trying to get that whole assembly out. There are a few other things we're going to have to do under here, but I will show you guys when we get there. Then the shifter itself, you just get the column out of here, the center console. I think there was 3 or 4 screws on each side of it, and it came right out. And then you can get to your shifter. There's 4 bolts underneath the car, which we already popped out. I had to cut mine, but if yours is in decent shape, you should be able to just undo them and that will come right out. And then your automatic shift linkage goes right through here. Well, with the manual, you have to actually cut this out because the shift linkage will hit it. So instead of going about cutting it, we're gonna try to drill these spot welds and go about it that way, see if I can get it out like that. Another issue that we had that I didn't really cover, not a huge deal, is you will need a shift linkage from a manual D series. I think the B series is a little bit different, but we got our shift linkage with our transmission, which you can see right here, and it's pretty rusty, crusty. The guy just threw it in, but these joints down here should be able to move, and ours was locked up completely solid. So I used my drill press to drill the pins out of it. Since this is not serviceable from Honda, you can't really get the parts. So I just drilled it out to 5/16, got some nice long shoulder 5/16 bolts and some lock nuts with washers, and now this thing moves freely just like it should. And then instead of using the pin down here, we're gonna use a bolt. So we're gonna try to make it work that way just for ease of assembly and whatnot instead of fighting with that pin. So let's go ahead and get inside this thing and we will start modifying for the shift linkage. That's the next thing that we're gonna work on, and then we can make a line for our clutch, hook up a couple last minute things. Let's go ahead, get in the car and get back to work. All right guys, so quite honestly, I've changed my mind. I'm just gonna cut this thing. I'm tired of messing with it. I can't tell if there's more spot welds or if it's just a seam sealer or what, but I can't get this thing to separate how I was hoping to. So I'm just gonna get under here with a die grinder or a Dremel, whatever will fit, and I'm just gonna cut this thing right out. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right guys, so we've got this poly mount for the shifter. We're gonna mark the holes. You can see the indents right here in the factory body, and we're just gonna use a center punch, mark our holes, and we'll get this thing drilled out. All right, let's get under the car and finish bolting up this shifter. So I went ahead and threw those bolts in underneath and then hooked it up at the transmission, and we now have a shifter. It seems to go into gears fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then reverse. So we seem to be good. It's a little bit loose going side to side, but for how bad that front bushing was, it actually doesn't have a whole lot of play. So I think we're gonna be fine. That rear bushing tightened up real nice. So next thing we're gonna work on is in the engine bay. We're gonna come around here and start making our new clutch line. We've got to go from our clutch master down here all the way around up to our clutch slave cylinder right here. I'm just going to make it out of some hard line. Instead of buying the soft line and hard line that these had factory, I'm just going to make the whole thing out of a solid line and then do a coil, so if there's any flex or whatever. But I think that's going to work out just fine. And then our reservoir should be here a little bit later today, and we should be good to go. So let's get this line made so we can start bleeding it. So I went ahead and got that hard line made for the clutch master to slave, and we got it ran up back along there. Not the prettiest thing I've ever done, but for this thing it's going to work out just fine. Got it ran all the way to the master up here. Now we're going to get ready to install our reservoir so that we can start bleeding this thing. I got this one on Amazon, cheap little $30 reservoir. Should thread right into the fitting on the master itself. So let's go ahead and get this thing on. So we got that line tightened down and the reservoir in. Like I said, this is the Amazon reservoir, and I wasn't 100% in love with how the O-ring felt. So we're gonna throw some fluid in it and see if this thing leaks. Knock on wood it doesn't, but let's go ahead and fill it up and see what happens. We've got my little air bleeder hooked up here, and see if we can't get some fluid out of this thing and some air bubbles. Yep, it's going down. Little by little. Alright guys, so we got Dad in the car. We're going to have him slowly press the clutch pedal and check for leaks and movement and all that good stuff. Alright, go ahead and push it down slow. Oh yeah, it's moving.
She's at the floor.
Alright, come back up.
Alright.
Oh yeah, she moved. So everything's working there. Knock on wood. I don't see any leaks yet.
Alright.
Looks good so far. It's looking good, guys. We might bleed it one more time. I'm gonna take a feel, see how it feels. And we are gonna have to adjust the throw, but I don't think we're gonna know that till it's running. So let's go feel that pedal real quick and give it a final bleed, and then I think we're ready to start putting the exhaust on. So after we got the clutch bled, I went ahead and just threw the radiator back in it, and then we're pretty much waiting on a starter. The starter was supposed to be here this afternoon, but it didn't show up. It's supposed to be here tomorrow morning now, so we're just waiting on that. We had to make a gasket for this exhaust. I just bought some exhaust gasket material, and Dad cut out a gasket for it. We're gonna trim that off after, but we just want to make sure it's gonna work. So right now we're just waiting on that starter, and then hopefully that'll come in tomorrow morning, and we'll be able to fire this thing up and see if we're gonna be able to trick it and make it work with the factory automatic ECU. So let's pull this thing outside, pull the GTO back in, and wait for that starter. All right guys, so it is the next day. Sorry for any wind noise. We're gonna be working on it outside a little bit today because we already put the GTO back inside, but the starter finally came, so we're gonna get ready to put that on. We've still got to throw some fluid into the transmission. I'm gonna be using a mix of 550 engine oil and some Royal Purple Synchromax. There's a lot of controversial talk about what to use in these things. There's Honda manual transmission fluid. Some people say 1030, 1040, but we're gonna try a little bit of a mix here since the Synchromax is a little bit on the thinner side and the 550 is a little bit on the thicker side. So we're gonna use that, balance it out, and just see what happens. But like I said, we've got a new starter for it right here. Got it from Rock Auto, a little cheap guy. So we're gonna go ahead and get ready to put this thing on. Let's see if we can get it to start. We've got the starter sitting in there. I don't know if I mentioned it, but you do need a bottom bolt for it. Picked this up earlier today. I believe it was M8 by 125 and then 100 long. So we're gonna go ahead and get this bolt started in there and then hook up a couple last minute things throw the transmission fluid in it and see if this thing fires off. So I just went ahead and pumped our first bottle of oil into the transmission. You can see I'm using my little fluid extractor or pump. You need to get a little electric one, but we've got it going right into the fill plug. Now we're gonna go ahead and throw a quart of the Royal Purple in it, then some Lucas, and then we'll top it off with some more regular oil. So let's go ahead and finish getting this thing filled up. So we got some coolant mixed up and Ed's filling it up right now. Gotta let it go through the system, and then we should be ready to try starting this thing up and see what happens. So let's get the coolant filled up and then fire this thing up. Let's go ahead and start it up and see what it does. Yep. Yeah, I gotta play with that park sensor. Unlock the door.
This one.
So I didn't do any wiring yet, guys. I just left the sensors or the switches hooked up. Yeah, go ahead, try the key. So I can make it think it's in park.
That's the drive.
Fired right up. Something's making a little noise. You think it's that distributor? Oh, I hear it right here. It's actually idling pretty good for having everything for the transmission unplugged. I thought it'd be whacking out. Tax reading. Check engine light's obviously going to be on. Transmission's flashing a code. Not a big deal right now. Let it run for a minute. Keep topping it off with coolant, and then see what happens.
Warm already. Oh, gasket.
Oh yeah, our gasket we made. We didn't trim it yet, but curious to see if it works. I don't feel any exhaust around it. So that's cool. Once we get this manual swap wrapped up and everything working, it's gonna be time to slap the turbo on this thing. Get the turbo on it and get some Honda data for it and let this baby eat. Sounds good for my 2-minute exhaust. All right, guys, let's see if it'll go into first gear. Clutch feels weird.
Close your door.
I don't think the clutch is working right.
All right, see if it'll go into gear.
Did.
Take the e-brake off and try it.
Really low to the ground.
Okay. Not making noise, we're doing good. Try reverse. All right, see it burn out. Smoke them up. Oh yes, going good.
Seems good. All right, guys, so the next thing that we're going to try to tackle is the ignition here. So as you can see, we've got it to work and everything, and the car starts and runs, obviously. but once you put the key in, you can't get it back out. Even if you play with the park and drive neutral sensor right here, the shift sensor, you still can't get the key to come out. So what we've been doing is, if you come out here and disconnect the battery real quick, which we'll do, come out here, pop the positive off the battery real quick, just like so. Let it sit for just a second. Then the key will come out. Just like so. So we're gonna take the cylinder out of here, and there should be a little locking mechanism that doesn't let the key come out unless it's in park. So it only partially thinks it's in park for whatever reason. So we're gonna take this panel off. You've got a screw here and then a screw on the other side. Get this panel off, and then I'll show you what the lock cylinder looks like and what we have to do to it. So now that we've got the top and bottom cover off of our steering column, you can see the ignition cylinder is right here, and we've got this little white cover right here. It's got one Phillips head screw on it. We're gonna go ahead and take that screw out, and I will show you guys the mechanism underneath it. So we've got that screw out. Now we're just gonna pry this little plastic cover and everything off, just like so. And now that it's off, you can see that in it right here, there was this little lock cylinder thing, this thing right here, and it would lock us from getting the key out. So now that that's out of our way, we can take this, unplug it right here, take this out of the way, and let's go ahead and throw this column back together. And now the key should come out when we want it to. Now that we've got this little cylinder lock out of there, we can go ahead and turn the key. Everything comes on, and it comes right out. So we're good to go. I'm gonna throw this back together, and then we've got a couple other little things we've got to do. All right, so there's a few things inside the car we still need to button up, one of them being this big opening, and then we've also got to do some wiring, which we will do in a few minutes here. But I found this super thin tin. It's like a very thin sheet metal almost, and I think I'm going to use that to cover up this hole. So what I did was I took a piece and I covered it in Gorilla Tape just on the one side to help keep vibrations or noise out of it, and I trimmed out for the shifter, and we're just going to set it in just like so, and then we'll use some seam sealer to get this to bond down to the metal and get this big opening covered up. We've still got to do something with this, but I'm not really worried about it right now. We'll put the center console in and everything after the wiring, and worry about that later. That's super minor. So let's go ahead, get some seam sealer and get this all covered up. At least we've got it on there. It's a mess, but it's on there, and it's gonna seal up that hole. Now we can start working on that wiring. So now for some of the wiring stuff. First off, we're gonna take this smaller plug and just unplug it. Get that right out of our way. Set that aside for now. And there are a few ways you can go about doing this, guys. Sorry for any background noise. We're obviously outside. But the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna leave our connector here, and I'm gonna cut it after that, so that worst case scenario, if you ever needed to or wanted to, you could just get from this plug on. So we're gonna cut it back in here somewhere, make everything still usable if needed for whatever reason. So we've got that peeled back, and now what we're gonna need mainly is we need the two thicker wires here. We've got a black with white stripe and a black with red stripe, and we're gonna cut those, and we need to tie those into each other. And if you don't already, disconnect your battery for now, or simply take and unplug this connector. I'm gonna do both, and now we can work with just the connector. So we're gonna end up tying these two thicker wires directly together. That's gonna allow us to start the car. And then we're also gonna take the two wires on the connector that are directly opposite of them. You've got a solid yellow and a green with black stripe. We're gonna need those for our reverse lights. And you can see they are right below it on the actual switch here too. You've got yellow and then green and black. So we're gonna cut those, and we're gonna end up using those. We'll have to wire them out to the engine bay to our reverse switch. Now the rest of these we don't really need, so we can go ahead and just cut them off right here for now. So now we can take our whole assembly, set it to the side, and just deal with our harness end here. So we're going to tie these together, then these we're going to add wire to and run it out to the engine bay so that we have our reverse lights. Now you got to take those two other wires we had here, the solid yellow, and hook them up to your own wires that we will run out into the engine bay. So I'm using some yellow, and then for the green, I'm going to use some white. So go ahead and crimp these. Now we can go ahead and heat shrink these up and run them out into the engine bay. Those wires that I just showed you us connecting, we went through this grommet right here, and we just threw them up along the firewall for now, came down over to here, and now we're gonna need to connect to the reverse sensor, which is these wires right here, and it goes right down under here, kind of under the distributor. That's the connection right there. Can't really see it too well, but now we just need to tie those two wires into this right here, and we should have reverse lights. All right guys, so we got that all wired in and tucked away, and then we've got it tucked up underneath the dash like I had mentioned. You can do it however you guys want. That just happened to work good for us, so we ran it up along there. Before we go putting anything back together, we're just gonna plug our harness back in that we spliced into, make sure that this thing runs, and then check for reverse lights. So let's go ahead and fire this thing up. We're gonna check our reverse lights, and if those work, we'll go ahead and see if this thing starts. Yep, they work. Awesome. All right, now let's see if it starts. Awesome. Good. So what we did worked. Now we can go ahead and throw the center console back in it.
There you go, now try it. Looks like I made it perfect.
Yeah, that'll work for now. We're just going to use that piece of foam to block off around the shifter. And then, like I said, we'll worry about a boot for it later, but for now, this is going to work perfectly fine. As you guys can see, we got the console back together. Looks pretty good. I'm happy with it so far. So let's go ahead, fire this thing up, and finally take it for a ride. Actually shifts super smooth. Might have to adjust the clutch rod a little bit. It was grabbing real low in the driveway, and now it seems to be grabbing more higher. Way more fun to drive with a standard. Some guys say they have trouble trying to run the manuals with the auto ECU, but so far so good. We do have a Honda S300 for it, but I wanted to see if we could do it with the factory computer first. Seems to go into gear pretty decent. really good with that stage 1 clutch. You can't even tell, it feels stock. So super happy about that. If you guys want to see us make some pulls with it, you're gonna have to stay tuned for next video when we get this thing back on the dyno, and for the turbo install video that'll be coming up soon. Let's head on back to the house and give this thing a once over and see if we got any leaks or issues or anything like that. All right guys, so we got the manual swap done. This thing drives great. We don't have any issues with it. Shifts nice and smooth, so I'm super happy about that. And I'm super pumped that we were able to use the stock 99 Civic auto ECU. We didn't have to switch it over to a manual, which was super cool. Wasn't sure if we were gonna be able to do it, but like I showed you guys, there's a few little wiring things you have to do, but it does work. As long as you don't need that check engine light off, it'll work perfectly fine with the auto ECU. Super pumped with how this thing turned out. I can't wait to slap the Honda S300 in it and slap the turbo on it and start seeing what we can make for some power. We did pick up a Honda, it's right here. We went with the S300 V3, so we do have the option of running flex fuel, and this one also has the capability for boost by gear. So super excited about that. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the rest of the build on the channel. As always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell. We also did pick up some new sweatshirts. We have a new design for shirts and sweatshirts. This one is nice, simple, cut and dry, and to the point. I'll put a picture of it right up here so you guys can check it out. If you guys want a shirt or sweatshirt, make sure to hit up the Bought to Build official Instagram page. Shoot me a message and I'll get you guys taken care of. I haven't had the time to make a website yet, so I'm working on it and I will get there eventually. So like I said guys, I appreciate you for checking out the channel, and we will catch you on the next one.